One of the things that I think is really challenging is family businesses often start with a really great idea. Someone is creative and inventive and they just go for it. They didn't go to school and get an MBA and decide I'm going to strategically do this. They jump all in. And then everyone wears the hats. Everyone is doing something. Even with my business, my kids, and you just pull people in.
Strengthen the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle in your family business. This is Fearless Family Business. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fearless Family Business Show. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Adam Hill. I am your host, and my guest today is Dr. Donna Marino. And Dr. Donna Marino has her doctorate in psychology, where she worked as a psychologist for a number of years before moving into the world of family business. So that intersection between psychology and family business is a powerful one, and where she shares her knowledge as a trusted advisor, a coach, and serves on a lot of advisory boards within the world of family business. And her story is incredible. We talked a lot about many different subjects, including how she got her start and her relation to family business earlier. Her family was deeply involved in the construction of a lot of key projects in Manhattan, including bridges, including the World Trade Center towers. And sadly, her father died in the Twin Towers during 9/11, which was a tragedy that ultimately shaped some of the trajectory of her career, in her life and her career. And we went into that. We got into that story a little bit during this interview. And it also led into some conversations around grief in family business and how we experience that and how we can get through that while continuing to build successful businesses. And ultimately, our conversation went into the world of conflict and governance and all of the fun things that we deal with in family business that make us family business. And Dr. Donna Marino is an expert in that subject. And so a little bit about Dr. Donna. Dr. Donna Marino is a family business trusted advisor and executive coach with over 2 decades of experience as a psychologist. She helps family businesses overcome the emotional and behavioral roots causing challenges such as conflict, communication mishaps, poor leadership decisions, succession sabotage, and control issues that keep the business from growing. Man, imagine being able to work through all of those things to become more successful. So Dr. Marino has a particular passion for helping families through the transition from Gen 2 and Gen 3. We talk about that a lot in this interview as well, about the importance of those generations in particular, and helping to develop Generation 3 to establish their leadership success at the helm of the company. And in addition to her coaching practice, Dr. Marino serves as a part-time faculty member at Loyola University's Family Business Center, where she facilitates peer advisory groups, and the Prairie Family Business Association, where she facilitates affinity peer groups. Dr. Marino is also an author and a speaker on topics such as empowering women in leadership, managing workplace conflicts, and emotional readiness for leaving your business. Dr. Marino hosts the podcast, which I will be a guest on shortly, called Courageous Conflict. And there she talks about all things family business. So please enjoy my wide-ranging interview with Dr. Donna Marino. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to my guest, Dr. Donna Marino. I'm so grateful that you're here today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity of being interviewed on your show, Courageous Conflict, recently as earlier this week. And
Yes.
I'm going to steal a question for you right off the bat because I love it. As far as superhero origin stories, this is the direction you go. So I'm throwing it right back at you. I really want to hear your origin story, how you came into the world of family business from the psychology background.
Yeah. Like many people, I took a circuitous route to where I am today. I grew up in a family that was not a family business, but it was 3 generations of Manhattan electricians on construction jobs.
Oh, wow.
And so my grandfather worked on the Verrazano Bridge when it was created and did the electrical work on that. And then my father did the World Trade Center. And then my brother did the scoreboard at Yankee Stadium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when I look at the skyline and look around New York, that's like our family history and our legacy. And when I was growing up, it was Grandpa's Bridge and Dad's Towers. They were like ours.
Wow.
And so similar to a lot of family businesses, what was instilled to me a lot was a sense of family and loyalty and, you know, no matter what's going on, maybe inside the family, you always have each other's backs, as well as a really hardcore work ethic from my dad there.
Well, you have to have that, right? If you're going to build bridges and skyscrapers. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Yes.
Yeah. And we used to get the opportunity to run around in the freight elevators and things like that when we came. It was really cool, and everyone knew my dad, so that was always awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love the idea that you can that within that family legacy that you have this tangible thing that you can see, you know, every time you go outside and just know that your family legacy was a part of that. That's pretty incredible.
It is, and was very special growing up. And, you know, not a lot of people have that, right? Yeah. So I was in graduate school getting my doctorate in psychology, and, you know, my dad was super proud of me. I'm the only one with a doctorate. My generation of cousins and such are really the first to go to college, lots of trade school and such, but first to go to college. But when I was in graduate school, 9/11 happened. And my dad still worked at those towers and was in them.
Oh,
and
gosh.
He was doing a job for Cantor Fitzgerald at the time. He frequently did so, and we knew a lot of people on that floor. And so, as you can imagine, that was a tremendously traumatic time and a lot of grief, and just I've always wanted my dad to be proud of me, and he's such a big part of me. He's taught me so much, and we were very close. And I think that just made me even more committed to doing something impactful in the world. And I feel like that's partly living his legacy, right? Is continuing that work and making him proud. And so I kind of twists and turned a bit in psychology. I actually started out with children in foster care and working on that level. And there's only so long you can work in that level of trauma. And, you know, as I was going through my path, I discovered positive psychology, which is the study of what happens when things go right.
Oh.
So instead of pathology, you're studying longevity, wellness, joy, work-life balance, satisfaction. And I just really fell in love with that. It was very conducive to my mindset. And when I discovered that, I really wanted to pivot into coaching and helping people create peak performance and reach their potential. When I started my coaching business, I got a referral from a colleague, and it was a family business. And that's really when I fell in love with it all. It was like all my values, all the things about me, my father's legacy, just all came together. And having seen some of my own friends where their businesses. I knew sisters that were now suing each other and breaking up a business they started together. And seeing that, I just knew that it didn't have to be that way, and that someone like me could help them navigate that so that the family could stick together and they could grow the business, knowing that the impact that has on communities, the family, but their communities, and even on a global scale. So that's kind of how I got there.
That's quite a journey that you've been on, and I'm so sorry about, I guess, the ignition source that started your trajectory, but really grateful for where it took you. And if you're okay with that, I'd like to kind of just explore that a little more, because those sudden traumatic events, I can only begin to imagine how difficult that could be. I mean, we all witnessed that horrible day, and you experienced it, which is just a different kind of story.
Oh yeah.
And
it's,
oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's interesting because, I grew up in New York. I was living in DC going to graduate school when this happened. And then I came out to Chicago for my psychology internship. And in the Chicago area, for many people, I'm the only person they've ever met that lost someone in 9/11. Where on the East Coast, sadly, it's a lot more common. I know a lot of people. So that's been really interesting, that sort of shock factor, and in some ways getting over being the face of that for people. It's very complicated.
Sure. Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's very high profile, and so you almost didn't get to grieve. It sounds like you didn't get to grieve, privately in that sense.
Oh yeah, it's very strange seeing essentially your personal life all over the TV and hearing other people talk about it. It's very strange experience.
Yeah. How did you, having that psychology background, or having gone through that, you kind of mentioned that it shifted your focus a bit into where, and maybe defined where you wanted to go. But I would imagine there had to have been a lot of healing in there. How did you approach that with the psychology background that you had? Were you getting help with that? Did it just kind of come organically? How did that process go for you?
Yeah, such a good question. One thing was that my siblings and I just stuck together, right? We knew that would be one of the most important things for my dad, that he would want the four of us to be united in this, to support each other, to divide and conquer all the work that came after it, but to be each other's, strength and togetherness. So, coming back to that family again, that was so important. I would say that, yes, I went to therapy, but it took a little while. It was like the early stages are so painful that you're not even ready to go to therapy. And I really honestly felt like a ghost walking around for a long time. I just felt like this hollowness and felt like everybody could see it when they looked at me.
Yeah.
So I kept going to school, and I did as much as I could. I found that I could not read my textbooks, that my brain just couldn't process the information, couldn't stay focused. But then there were things that I could do, like my internship applications, and I could show up at class. I had a very supportive environment at school too, my friends and my professors. And really that support system was so important. And because the upside, I guess, of it being so public was that everybody knew, and people really crowded around myself and my family. So, and then when I was ready, I did go to therapy to process that all, which was a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really do appreciate you sharing that, because even tying it back to the family business model, I mean, I know that with how many family businesses there are in the country, and just generally how many families there are, there are times when suddenly there's the loss of maybe a matriarch or a patriarch, and the family not only has to deal, with the loss and grieve the loss, but also continue on. And, I wonder if in that experience you have any, there are a few lessons you just shared there that I think were really powerful, which are, stick together, just find that community. And the other one was just focus on what you can focus on. And, but what, are there any other kind of lessons you might share with families that might be experiencing that?
Yeah. In the family business perspective, I've seen where, as you said, the matriarch or patriarch who's running the company is suddenly not there. It could be an illness, it could be a death. And maybe the company is not prepared, but also, this family is grief stricken, and trying to process that and do all the work. Right, which was a lot of what we had to do as well. My father wasn't married at that time, and so we're processing all this grief, and we're doing things like canceling credit cards and finding out about insurance and all that aftermath. So, the bit of advice that I would definitely give is, in addition to that support, acknowledging the grief. And what I mean by that is grief is so much more than death. It's really loss, right? So it could be someone's here, but they're incapacitated or not functioning like they used to. Yeah. It can be a divorce. It can, we often don't process our grief unless it's death. We think death is grief and that's it. And one of the things I learned in that process was kind of accepting what my limits were during that time. Another thing that I did was I stepped out of doing therapy for a while. I was like, I have nothing to give. I have to do my own healing. I wouldn't be fully showing up. And so thinking about what your limits are, and I know because family businesses are hardworking, it can be very challenging to let go of some things, or get to good enough instead of perfect. Right?
Yeah. So much. There's so many. I'm so guilty of that, looking for perfection before good enough, and I know a lot of us are. And that's such a great insight that grief is more than just death. It's loss. That the implications I hear there too are there's a number of ways we can experience loss in the family or the family business. We could, it's divorce, or it could be the loss of a job, especially the loss of a job in a family business. There's a lot of ways we can experience grief. And I know that your experience in psychology and the family business world is probably seen that intersection quite often.
Oh, definitely. I mean, talk about having to fire a family member, right? There's grief on both sides of that, right? You both feel awful. It can cause huge ruptures in the family. And like I said, those points where family members are not talking to each other anymore, maybe they're even in court with each other, that is grief. That tears me up because of how important I know that family unit is, and how I know in my heart it doesn't have to be that way, that through communication, and you usually do need an outside person to help facilitate that, someone who is not tied up as much in the emotional and who can be objective. and who can both hear both sides, but then relay it back. This is what I heard. Is that correct? And
right.
Wait a second. Did you hear them say X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
You know, and direct it in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and that's an interesting point too, having the outside perspective within that conflict. And that is really kind of where your wheelhouse is, you know, within the conflict side of things. So you're finding that within that family business advisory and where that psychology, and the family business kind of intersect, that outside perspective, somebody that might have that, you know, perspective from a different point of view, that can be helpful in resolving that conflict, maybe before it goes to court, maybe, or even after. I'm understanding that right?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I would say the biggest mistake people make is waiting too long. I've come into situations where I've thought, if you just brought me in a year ago when this started, you know, this would be a lot easier to resolve, right? Yeah. Now we have a year more of resentment and aggravation and miscommunication. So people often wait too long to have these kinds of conversations. Yeah. I, in particular, like to, you know, talk to each individual privately first, you know, get that one-on-one, and then bring them together to facilitate these kinds of meetings and help people have empathy, help people have self-awareness. It's really about expanding those emotional intelligence skills so that they can communicate better and realize that most likely they really want the same thing. There's a mutual purpose or goal there. It might just be growing the company or having the company thrive or having it passed down to the next generation. And the conflict comes in because they have different ideas of how to do it or old resentments. You know, when we're family, I say we do a lot of play that tune, right? Name that tune, yeah. Where we are like, I know how he's going to respond to this and I know what he's going to say. And we're just that future casting before we've even had the conversation. And we see them as that 12-year-old, 15-year-old, and we're not really looking at them as the professional they are today or giving benefit of the doubt. And we might even be reacting as if they did it before they even did. And then we've got this self-fulfilling prophecy that's created.
Yeah. Yeah. So we basically say, yeah, they're going to react like this. We go up to them and approach them in such a way, and they react like that. Shocker, right?
Yes. Right. Our defenses are already up.
Right. That's so. I mean, and so is there a right time to approach that third party, that outside resource, or you mentioned kind of as early as possible. Like when is that time when people should be thinking, hey, maybe we should bring somebody in to help us with this?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you're doing it proactively. You know there's a big transition coming up that could get sticky or complicated, and you want to prevent that. You want to have another set of eyes and ears there. Succession planning is, you know, one of the big ones, and people often don't think of that sort of emotional piece, communication piece during the planning. They think of estate planning, the lawyers, the accountants, wealth management, and yes. They don't realize that this is a huge emotional process for everyone involved. I've seen people start negotiating succession with their family and the next gen, and then they get cold feet and they pull back and they decide to stay. And what does that do to the family, the level of trust? I was very grateful. I had the opportunity to help a family through a succession that had failed 2 times before. And by getting the present owner emotionally ready like talking about what does this look like? What are you going to do when you don't work in the business? That's a huge thing. Yeah. This is our baby. This is another family member. This is not like anything else. And so you've grown it. And how will you fill your time? And how will you develop trust that the next generation can do this? And, and it's amazing how much is not communicated in the process when you don't have a facilitator. How many times I've asked, well, did you tell them that? Did you ask them that? No. Do you think I should? It involves them. So,
Sure.
So those kinds of transitions, even scaling very quickly, right? Doing reorganization, those are great places because who's going to feel bad about this one not being in this role, or competition for who's going to be president, who's going to be, CEO, chairman on the board. It gets sticky when you're all related.
Yeah, it does. It does. And the further down the line in the generations you go, I mean, the stickier it gets with more people, more personalities and different styles there. And what I'm really hearing about that is that, if I'm understanding is that you just want to be really clear on what your objective is, and then try to target the solution to that and be surgical with it.
Yes.
and follow through, right. And engage all the parties involved. Is that right?
Yeah. That accountability is huge. And there's a lot of family businesses that aren't having family councils or family meetings, and they're not really talking. And as you said, the further on the business goes, the more and more people are involved. So how do you communicate? How do you make decisions? A lot of family businesses wait a very long time to have any kind of formal governance set up, to have boards and advisory boards, and it can get pretty chaotic without that kind of structure. One of the things that I think is really challenging is, family businesses often start with a really great idea. Someone is creative and inventive and they just go for it. Right. They didn't go to school and get an MBA and decide I'm going to strategically do this. They jump all in, right? And then everyone wears the hats. Everyone is doing something, even with my business, my kids, and you just pull people in.
Yeah.
And then as you get bigger, though, that model doesn't work anymore. You really need to be strategic about who's in what role. You need to have the right staff, the right amount of staff. A huge issue is the owners letting go of things and delegating and letting somebody else do it, because they've really got to be the big vision thinker. And, that's a time too that I get brought into how do we navigate all this? And as you said, the personalities, the expectations, and without clear communication on that, there can be a lot of hurt feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious how, because this is such great insight into how especially the family governance piece and how, we should create that structure to make sure that we can be successful. How do you engage in those discussions early? Say there's a family business where there is a leader who's that visionary, founder or maybe second generation leader. The business is successful, everything's going great, but there's no family governance structure, and so there's no real need for that leader to think that they need one. But obviously putting that structure in place will prevent a lot of future problems. How do we engage in those conversations to help those leaders know that this is an important proactive step to, building in that sustainability for the future?
Yeah, I think a big piece up front is education and, again, addressing those fears. Usually that, again, is an emotional decision. It comes out of a fear of losing some control over the business, afraid of losing ownership or decision making, especially, well, if I have a board, are they going to tell me what to do? This is my company. And not having an education necessarily on why you would want that and how you can establish it. And that there are people out there that can help you with that. You don't have to figure it out all on your own. That there are consultants and peers. And I think that that peer relationship, having a family business that's gone before you in this and how they did it and what they learned from it, because it usually is the, oh, wow, we should have done this sooner.
Yeah.
And thinking far ahead, right? With succession, you should really be thinking about that, at least 5 years before. And people wait till often, well, I'm thinking of retiring next year. And it really is a process, including how do we start teaching the next generation, right? Not just the, say, transition from 2 to 3, but what does 4 look like? And even if they're 10, do you bring them to trade shows? Do you have them come to work with you, once a month, once a quarter? There's lots of different ways, and you have to really think ahead. And I see so many companies just caught in the putting out fires. And it's hard to get out of that pattern once you've started it.
It is. And it almost kind of brings up the idea that you have to, it's kind of like when, I don't know if you had this experience when you were a psychologist, but people go to therapy when things are going wrong. But you almost need to find that coach or find that therapist or find that person when things are going really well, and that's the time to do it. I think we may be starting to get there. I think more people are starting to get into coaching, and I hope you're seeing more of that. But it's a big hurdle to overcome where, well, things are going well. Why do I need this? Well, because you could always do better, and you could always improve. And you always need that outside perspective. I think that's hugely valuable.
Yes. And I've seen more of, I have a lot of clients who are third gens, and I see a lot more of them coming in, and they're very employee focused. They're very culture focused, and they're avid learners and just want to keep growing. They have that lifelong learning gene, and they're not waiting for calamity before they bring someone in because they can see those advantages. And I do think it's also generational, right? It's more open, and we see younger generations who have grown up with more of that outside support, and so they're more open to it and don't necessarily wait, although some do, right, for that crater before they talk to someone to get help to thrive.
Right. So I know you do work primarily, or not, maybe not primarily, but most you work with a lot of second to third generation or so companies, and I wonder. So what is it around those generations that you're attracted to, as far as where to inject that structure and how to manage that conflict and build in the right kind of governance?
Yeah, I think the second generation, they watched usually their parents, right, build that, and they were in the nitty gritty. They grew up in that business, and they saw it go from nothing to something. And so they really witnessed that. Now, the second generation comes in as the business is usually doing well, right? That's why there's a transfer. And the third generation hasn't usually seen like that ground up, right? That's grandpa. And I'm sure they remember the business and running around and all of that, but didn't necessarily see those early lean years. I think the second generation gets nervous a little bit about, can my kids handle this? One of the things I'm seeing is younger third generations coming in, third generations in their 30s coming in and taking over companies.
Oh, wow.
So there can be that hesitancy too. Are they really ready? And I think it's that combination, right? There's that belief out there that family businesses make it or break it in the third gen. So there's a lot of pressure on both. There's the fear from the second gen. There's that third gen who's like, there's a lot on my shoulders here. They want to honor legacy, which we talked about. Legacy is actually forward rather than backward.
Right.
They want to honor legacy, but they also want and need to, if the business is going to survive, innovate and create and expand and be adaptable. That's what will keep the business going. So they're an interesting position of, how do I learn from what came before me and take the things that still work and apply it? But how do I also remain nimble and modern and adaptable? And then you're talking value differences as well, as now, you're 2 generations out or more. The values are really changing. So it becomes more complex. As you said, too, there's usually a lot more people now in that generation, and that they're responding to, how do you break up ownership? Like, it just gets more complex then. And it's fun to watch this generation rise and take the reins and figure it out and figure out who they are as leaders.
Yeah. I love how you put it there, because it does get a lot more complex around the third generation, I feel like. And, coming from a 4th generation background here, to your point about not knowing the founder, like not having a physical relationship, like that kind of relationship with that founder. I have very, very vague memories of my great grandfather, the person who started our company, like just this when I was 5 years old, an imposing man standing in a hallway. That's all I remember. And yeah, so you kind of lose that touch, and things do get more complex. You get a lot more people. And if I feel like if you're not intentional about putting those structures and systems in place between the second and third generation, or even sooner, it's going to get away from you, and you lose it. You don't lose the bit, but you lose the ability to really rein in the structure, because now it's just run away. Now there's 100 owners and all sorts of problems that come with that. Yeah. It's amazing
How big the business can get. I have a client whose business is 120 years old. I think they're 5th gen. And it's like, there's a lot of shareholders. There's a lot of people involved. And I feel so honored to be a part of these businesses. I know so many that are 100 years old or more, and I am just in awe of that. It's beautiful to me, and I just feel so much joy and honor to be invited into that. To me, that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, if it's not digging too deep on any particular company, how would a 120-year-old company, 5th generation with many different owners, how would you see them effectively structuring their business or their governance?
Yeah, that's tricky.
I guess it's circumstantial, right?
Yeah. It certainly depends on, right, how many owners you have. Who's an owner, who's a shareholder, but maybe not all of those details, what that structure looks like, what level of involvement do people really want, and having a board, having a family council, having a family charter, things like that. I think you need that. And I think you really need someone to help you build all of that. And I don't do that, so I'm not saying that because, that's not my wheelhouse. But I think it's really helpful to have someone with true organizational expertise to help them tease that out, and how many should be involved in each thing, and then what does communication look like on the broad level for everyone.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess, there's a lot of nuance that goes into each specific business. And I know your wheelhouse is the psychology and the family business, and where those two kind of intersect, which is, and I'd kind of like to dig in a little more on that and just find out, from your perspective, having come from that psychology background and then being kind of pivoting into the family business world, where are you seeing a lot of that overlap? Where is the psychology background or the idea of working as a psychologist helping to provide benefit for family businesses?
In everything.
In everything. There you go.
Right. What people tend to have a really narrow idea of what psychology is, but it's one of the broadest fields I know. And psychology is really about thinking and behavior, which is everything that we do. So whether I'm looking at developing the best behaviors of a leader, like time management and prioritization and habit formation, that's psychology. You've also, behind every behavior, you have a belief system that's either working for you or against you. So you need to examine both. Okay, why am I successful in this situation, but not in this situation? Yeah. Okay, how can I borrow from the situation I'm excelling in and take what's working there and borrow that to apply it here? Mm-hmm. There's so much there. There's the emotional intelligence. How do you read a room? How do you notice your impact on other people? When you're working with any group, you're going to have people who run straightforward into conflict, and you're going to have the people who hide and avoid and try not to be seen. Yeah. A good leader knows how their people respond and knows how to adapt to the person they're talking to. Mm-hmm. This person needs a kick in the pants. They respond to that, and it's good, and we maintain our relationship, and that's actually what they need. This person, if you do that, they're going to be in tears in their office. Yeah. So how do you adapt to your people? How do you motivate them? I mean, motivation, accountability, all of this is really psychology.
Right. Yeah, it's such a great point. And I'm sure the conflict part is a big element of that, because how we socially interact with one another and deal with one another's personalities and ultimately resolve that conflict. That's all really business is just a series of conflicts that are solved by capable human beings that are able to solve that conflict together. So how do we manage that conflict in an organization where you do have different personalities in terms of how they approach conflict? Many are on the artificial harmony side of that conflict, where they just don't want to address it at all. And then there's others, like you say, that just want to go like a bull in the china shop, just straight on through. How do you balance that? How do you work through that?
The very foundation of it all is building trust and building an environment based on trust. I'm going to keep emotional safety here. I'm never going to criticize you as a person. You're A, X, Y, Z. We're going to talk about behaviors. We're going to assume positive intent. We're going to have curiosity. Curiosity is so, so important. And that really takes away the assumptions, right? If you're working with someone and you generally like this person, but now, you got that email and you're like, what? Be curious. What happened? What happened here? This is usually a very likable, easygoing person. Maybe they had a fight on the way in, but be curious and address it. Hey, I saw that email from you. It sounded like you were pretty irritated with me. I'm curious what happened? That's not your usual style.
Right.
Things like that. It's bringing in new ways of looking at things. And, I had a client who the company could not afford to lose her. She was a non-family member, one of the best in her position. They're short-staffed in that department to begin with, and she's rubbing people the wrong way. She's not demonstrating the values of the family and the company, and they want to set a good example as a company that these are our values. We mean it.
Right.
And one of the biggest things I taught her, which is so simple, is pause. We all have knee-jerk reactions. Don't send that email while you're hot-headed. Don't send that text. Don't walk out of your office to somebody's desk. Like, pause, breathe. You should not address conflict while you're at the height of your emotion.
Sure.
And if you need to, make an appointment to address it. I'm too hot today, but I'm going to ask this person if they'd meet with me tomorrow. And I'm going to really think about what I want to say. But walk in, Stephen Covey says this, walk in with the end in mind. So before you get in there, think about what's the outcome I really want to walk away with, both for me, for this person, for the business, for our relationship. Think about those things. It's going to really help you stay calm, word it better. Think about how this person receives communication.
Right.
We often deliver communication in the way we want to hear it and how we want it done. The person on the other side is not you, and they may not be able to receive communication in that way. And you really have to think about who's on the receiving end and what's the best way for me to deliver this information in order to get the outcome I want in the first place, right?
Right. No, that's such good advice, from that standpoint. And for the person that's kind of maybe trying to back off from being too aggressive in the conflict or reacting. And with regard to somebody who might be more conflict avoidant, like somebody who is just maybe afraid of conflict or just doesn't like it, doesn't feel good at it, or feels like they're being maybe bullied or they're just not confident in that. Do you have any advice for those kinds of people that so that they can maybe engage in that conflict in a healthy way and have the courage to go into it? Because I love the terminology that you use of being brave in the conflict or having that courageous conflict. So what would you say to somebody who's more conflict avoidant?
Yeah. There's several things. When I'm in the room facilitating a meeting, when I see that look on their face and they're not speaking up, that's when I personally love to call them out. Hey, I saw that. What are you thinking? We do work one-on-one on building their confidence, asking questions like, okay, on the one hand, what's the worst that can happen? Mm-hmm. Could you survive that? Is that like life and death? And on the other hand, what's the best that could happen? If this worked out in the best situation, what would that look like? And you can weigh out, is it worth the risk? Often we're just building up these stories. I'm going to get fired, or this person's never going to speak to me again, or they won't like me anymore. That is such a common one. In general, people want to be liked.
Yeah.
And then some people take that to another level. They really need to be liked to feel good about themselves. So, it's helping to, again, those thoughts, right? We all tell ourselves stories. Those stories are based on beliefs. They may even be at a subconscious level. So how do we draw those out? And, you can start by, here's the behavior. So what am I thinking that made me do that, act that way? What's the story I'm telling myself? And then, does that story serve me? Is it helping me or hurting me? And, what would be a better story for me to tell that would help me in this situation?
Yeah, that's such good advice, to really kind of just reflect on that, and also know that, if you're willing to have the courage to go into that conflict, you're going to gain people's respect too, which, the right types of people will like you in that instance.
It's interesting because oftentimes the avoidant person is most afraid of approaching the person who is not avoidant. But when you address it, that person who is not avoidant, absolutely you gain respect with them, because that's a value of theirs, is addressing that conflict. And so I find that even if they still disagree, they really respect that you were honest and that you addressed it. And, the expression, I think it comes from IBM, disagree and commit. We can disagree and still commit to what that outcome is going to be and how we're going to deliver it.
Yeah, that's so good. And a lot of times you have to, right?
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I also want to share that Dr. Donna Marino has a podcast called Courageous Conflict, where she engages in these conversations with other family business leaders and other advisors and people in the family business space to kind of get into the depth of these conversations. It's a really, really great show. And I highly recommend that after this, you go over there and you hit the subscribe button on that show as well. And Donna, I'm really grateful for you being here today with me to share some time and your insights. This was really, really great. I understand too that you, as a coach, you're offering free consultations to anybody that might want to reach out to you.
Yes, absolutely. My website is Dr. Donna Marino, and you can find me under LinkedIn under that same handle. It's DR for doctor, and I'm always happy to have a conversation and hear what's going on and offer you my help or somebody else's if there's someone who's a better fit. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, that's I appreciate you, Doctor, and thank you so much for being here and for being a part of this show. And if you're listening to this show, I hope you realize after listening to this that there are resources out there to help you through, whatever transitions you're going through, whatever conflicts you're going through, and the challenges that you might be going through in your family business, from the biggest to maybe the seemingly insignificant. And for goodness sakes, if you take anything from this episode, take this. Start when you're still doing well. Start when everything's going great, and you'll keep that momentum going. Dr. Donna Marino, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate you.
It was really my pleasure. I had a great time. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks. And everyone else out there, thank you for being here today. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe and rate it and give a nice review. And I appreciate all of you for listening. We will see you next time. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Fearless Family Business Show. If you're enjoying this show, please thumbs up this episode and subscribe wherever that subscribe button is. And you'll get more family business education and insights in your inbox. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, a colleague, a spouse, your mom, your dad, a second cousin, whomever you think might benefit from hearing this show. And if you're in a family business and you've got a great story to share, contact me, because I would love to see if you'd be a great fit for this show. I'd love to interview you. Or if you're struggling in your family business to find your unique identity or voice, or you need an injection of new life into your family business, I'd also love to hear from you. I'd love to learn more about you, and I'd love to see if I can help. Simply email me at adam@fearlessfamilybusiness.com, and we'll get you connected to the right place. Together, we can elevate the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle we all experience in our family businesses. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.